Hello and welcome to Hop Along Studio. So in today's video, I want to share with you how I use the paint pen in my creative practice. So let's start with what is a paint pen. A paint pen is basically acrylic paint in a marker format. They usually come in a few varieties of nibs. This one's a more bullet tip. I also have these fine tip nibs. And what I like about paint pens is they work so well on acrylics and other mediums. They work well on paper, on different matte mediums, gel mediums. They almost write on almost anything. What I find the problem is often for me, or my experience has been, after one use, most of them are done. Until recently. I recently found a paint pen that I have used on several projects and it has still not dried out on me or died on me. And for me, this is a huge change in my creative practice. So I'm going to be actually showing you a demo of these pens, why I like them so much, and even show you some of the other ones I've tried and why they haven't worked for me. So let's get started. So I'll start with the Posca pens, as they are my favorite paint pen, and they're the ones that I would definitely recommend. One, the price point's pretty good. I think I've been getting these for around $5 Canadian, give or take, depending on the size of the pen. And basically, and again, the smaller the pen, a little bit cheaper. The larger the pen, they're usually a little bit more money. But one thing to realize is, like, these ones here have a very fine tip. They're great for doing details. They're really great for just writing on your projects. And these are a 0.7 millimeter pen type pen. And so I have these in a few different metallic colors as well as black and white. Because I do like using metallic colors as accents on my art journal pages. Then I also have these ones that are 0.7 millimeter, but they're a bullet shape. So they have a bit of a different shape than the pen type. So that's something to think about when you're actually choosing a marker, is what are you using it for? What type of look do you want on this? And this is also one of those other bullet shape ones over the pen type. So I'm going to show you how one of these paint pens can be started and just how I end up using them in my work. So this is one that I actually haven't opened. And one thing about paint pens is they are not all equal. I'm a strong believer in buy what you can afford. There's lots of good brands out there. When it comes to paint pens, I feel like that isn't totally the case. There are very few brands I feel like are actually worth the money. And the Posca ones for me are the ones that are worth the money. I spent a lot of time buying paint pens that did not work. And I would get one use out of them, and there went my $5, $10. And I was getting so frustrated with it, I basically said, I'm done. I'm no longer going to use paint pens in my work. And that was that. And about a month ago, I was in a creative journaling class, and my teacher's like, no, you got to try out these Posca ones. So I did, and I was pleasantly surprised. They work according to plan. You don't have to prime them a lot to get them started, and they work as advertised, and they work consistently over and over again. So when you open this paint pen, you will notice that the tip is completely white. There is no paint in it yet. The idea of it is that you're supposed to shake it and then prime it. You want to shake it because the paint sometimes will divide in the pen, and then you just want to press down, and you'll notice that almost right away I ended up with a yellow tip. And so these ones do not take a lot to get started. And now I've actually started my pen. So I'm going to show you how it writes on both an acrylic surface and just a regular surface. And so this is more of a bullet shape. This is a larger bullet, 0.9 to 1.33. And so you can make fairly small areas. You can also make circles. So they're kind of good for filling in color, but they're also good for actually doing some fairly small shapes as well. And again, the size of the pen will affect how much detail you can get. But I'm not having too much trouble being able to control this. It basically works like a normal pen. And it's the same kind of on the acrylic as well. It's actually smoother on the acrylic, I find, than even the paper, but I wanted to show you both. So for those who might just be using a paint pen just on a paper surface, these work very well. They also work very well on top of acrylic paint, and that's where I usually end up using them a lot. I like adding details to my work, and sometimes I find that being able to actually have a paint pen that does what I'm hoping it will do does make a big difference. And then just by putting little dots like this, you don't even need to create circles. You can basically just come up with shapes. And this is a really great way of doodling. It's a great way of adding color to your art journaling pages. One of the reasons I use paint pens in my work is that they work on pretty much any surface. They are acrylic, so it's basically plastic, so it will dry. I find that sometimes, depending on whether or not, if you're using an ink, it sometimes will dry, sometimes it'll need some time to dry overnight, sometimes it won't dry, depending on the surface you put it on. So on paper, you can use all sorts of different pens, lots of different pigment inks or jelly pens or whatever else, but I find on acrylic or any sort of mixed media surface, let's say you're doing some collage and you want to add, and you're using gel medium and you want to add something on top, this is where the paint pen really shines, because again, it just writes so easily and dries quickly on top of pretty much any surface. And so I'll just show you a couple of the other ones that I have. So that's more of the thick bullet tip. I'll actually show you the 0.7 bullet shape next. And this is one I've used before. It's just been sitting in my art stash. And basically I haven't had to prime it or do anything to get it started. It basically just started right away, like a normal pen would be. My experience with these is sometimes you use them once with other pens and they never start again. I'm not sure if it has to do with the caps where it doesn't seal well, so you basically end up with a pen that dries some acrylic on it, and that's that. And one thing I will say is I actually live in a fairly dry climate, and the climate I'm sure affects it. We're considered semi-arid, so things dry out here. Things that would work really well maybe in England where you have a lot of high humidity do not work in my city. And because of that, I think that might be part of the reason why I have to be very particular on the type of pen that I like to use in my work. And then I'm going to show you one of the gold ones. So this is the pen type. And again, it's very small. And I'm just going to add some, you can add really tiny dots with these. Which you compare them even to this dot, it's a much smaller dot. And let's just do some swirls. And this is where, again, you can do some very fine detail with these. It just depends on kind of where you want to go with them. And they're really nice to write with. I actually use them a lot for adding journaling on top of my acrylic paint and my creative journal. I would say if you're looking for a paint pen, buy these ones. They're a really great price point. They work exactly as advertised, and considering that I'm in a very dry climate and I haven't had any issues with them, that says a lot about the consistency of these pens. So I'm going to also show you a few of the other ones I've bought over the years and some of the struggles that I've had with them, and also like why you'd maybe want to choose these Posca ones over some of the other ones. So the next pen I want to choose is Molotow One for All paint pen. And again, you want to shake it really well. And this one I've already started, so I'm going to just show you. You can get some paint out of it. It's working okay, but I find that the more I'm trying to write with it, it's not consistent. You're seeing it's getting drier and drier every single time that you write with it. It's okay, but it's way less juicy than these ones that you're getting a little bit more consistent result. And I find that sometimes I have to work them, and sometimes I have to like go on a sheet and try to get some of the paint going again before I can continue on. They're not a terrible paint pen, but they are double the cost of the Posca ones, at least in my city. And so that's something to think about. You may want to have a paint pen, but do you want to spend $10 on every single paint pen? Or would you prefer having one that you don't have to pay nearly as much for? And so I noticed that it's sometimes you have to press it a little bit to get the paint to flow. And what I'm noticing is like these are much more opaque than this particular paint pen. So it's not going to be necessarily as good when you're trying to add it to a surface, especially if you want some bright highlights. This is going to be a lot more fluid, and it's not going to be nearly as opaque and consistent as the Posca markers. So the other one I want to talk about is a Liquitex paint marker. This one I haven't had nearly as much success with. I'm going to try to get it started. There we go. And this one's better for doing big areas. And so if you're looking to do big areas and you just want to cover it up with paint, it works pretty well. Actually, to be honest, I've had more issues with this pen before. So the fact that it's actually working for this video is a bit of a surprise. And I think what I've run into, it's easier to get the larger bullet ones to get started and to work well. The key is finding a good paint pen that will work for doing small details. So let's talk about the Pebeo Deco markers. This is the one that I probably have had the most frustration with when it comes to a paint pen. So again, I want to take a piece of paper and just start the thing, if I can get it started. These ones, take a long time to start. You usually end up sitting there for a good minute trying to get the paint to come through. There we go. But you'll notice that just by trying to add it, it doesn't really work quite as well. I find that they do dry out and they don't work as well as they should. And again, it's one of those things that I like a juicy paint pen. I like something that will put lots of color down. I don't have to go over and over and over it to get it to actually show color. And so far this one's working okay. They do give you an extra nib. With a lot of these ones, I have had a collection of them over the years, and I have found that often I will get one use out of a nib, and then I need to switch the nib out, and then sometimes it doesn't even work. The last one I'll show you, these Dylusions paint pens. They are more of a crafting paint pen. They're no more in the scrapbooking circles. You can see, because they have the clear barrel, you can see how much the paint can sometimes separate out, which is why you want to give them that great shake. And that one, it got stuck in the barrel, and oh, there we go. It came back out again. All right, it's working today. I have to say that I have had some of these work for me, and I've had other ones that haven't worked for me. So it is more humid today. So maybe what I'm running into is there's more humidity in the air, so these seem to actually be starting. My intention for this video is to show you how the Posca ones work when everything else doesn't, but obviously my paint pens are having a better day. So far, so good. So this one, I was able to get it started, but it's going to struggle. You'll notice that it's not actually pulling in any ink into it. It's globbing ink around the edges, but it's not actually adding it down into the nib itself. And so when you have ones like this, they pretty much end up being dead. I have played with this one a lot trying to get it to work. So far, I had used this one once and it stopped working. So to recap, we've gone over 5 different brands of paint pens. We have the Uni-Posca, the Liquitex paint markers, the Molotow One for All, the Dylusions paint pen, and the Pebeo Deco marker. So my favorite paint pen by far is the Uni-Posca. The price point's great. I like the opaqueness of the acrylic paint inside of it, and they write consistently. I've never had an issue getting these things started, nor using them again and again without any issues. The Liquitex paint marker, I haven't used a lot of the smaller ones. This one I could say is good for doing large areas with a chisel tip. That I could say for sure. I have found that on and off I've had issues getting these things started. The Molotow, they are less opaque paint, and I prefer our opaque paint when I'm adding it on top of other surfaces when I'm doing my mixed media work. This one's also double the price as the Poscas, so if for a price point on value as well as quality, I feel like the Poscas are a better marker. The Dylusions, I've had a lot of trouble getting them started and having them stay started, and once they kind of get stuck, they pretty much, you can't really fix them. They don't have extra nibs. They are hard to try to get the nibs clear to try to get them working again. And the Deco marker, for sure, I have not today. They seem like they're working today, but in in many projects that I've had, I have messed with these over and over again. I cannot get them to write properly on acrylic and other things. This is not a marker that I would suggest buying. Honestly, of all of these ones, I would stick with the Poscas. So before we end this video, I wanted to show you a couple examples of where I've used the Posca paint pens in my work. So with this particular painting, I ended up creating the background with acrylic paint, and then I doodled all of this doodling with my Posca marker and didn't have any issues with it at all. I used both the bullet and the pin type nibs to complete this background. I also used my gold Posca pin type nib for doing all of the journaling around these flowers. As you can see, you can still see the writing very well. It doesn't have to be too big for it to work, and it goes on so much easier than gel pen. And the biggest thing about acrylic paint is also light fast. So when you're using this outside of your journal, maybe on a canvas, the nice thing about it is acrylic will not fade in the same way that ink will. So I hope you found this tutorial about paint pens useful for you, and that maybe you learned something new or something you might want to incorporate in your own creative practice. If you've enjoyed this video, if you could like it and subscribe to my channel, and maybe provide a comment below if you've liked this video or if you have any questions you would like to see answered. I also have my website, hopalongstudio.com, where I have lots of ideas on how you can have self-care in your creative practice. As well, I do have photos and written instructions for every tutorial that I do on this YouTube channel. So I hope you have a really great week, and I will see you next time.